Uh, Welcome everyone to the third and final event in our Iliad Alive series. As most of you probably know, this was a series of events put together by the Classics Department and VCLE, which is the Villanova Center for Liberal Education, and also Falvey Library. Really spearheaded by Dr. Gary Meltzer, who's sitting over there hiding in the back in the blue sweater, Director of Graduate Studies in Classics, and also Valentina Denardis, Director of Undergraduate Studies in Classics, and also Mary Lou Hill, who is not here yet, and Peter Bush, who is there. And I'm Brian Satterfield. I'm also at VCLE. The plan was really very simple. I think what we had in mind was to simply put the Iliad on people's radar. The idea being that if we could just talk about it, and if people could see us talking about it, that there was at least a ghost of a chance that students might become interested in it. Some might not be aware of it, might have been aware of it before, and they might actually be interested enough to pick it up and start reading it. And so we had 3 events scheduled. We had a 24-hour, or not 24 hours, we had it seemed like 24 hours. It started at 9 in the morning until almost midnight, reading of close to the entire Iliad. We couldn't quite get the whole thing in that time, but we came pretty close. We also saw Brad Pitt kill Eric Bana. Some of us saw that. But for the third part of it, we thought what we'd like to do is have a conversation and really just step back from the things that we had seen and sort of open it up to everybody. And I hope that you'll all regard this as an open invitation to take part. You know, this is it's intended to be that way. It's intended to be an open invitation. Those of you who are coming from Haverford High School, please also step forward. Don't feel like you can't participate in the conversation.
They've only read to book 8, but still they may be able to. The first part of the poem.
That's okay. The theme that's been proposed is, I think, what do we learn from Homer about peace and war and forgiveness? And as I remember, the way that theme came up was that Peter had proposed in the course of an email that the peace and justice people on the Villanova's campus might be interested in thinking about those concepts in relation to the Iliad. And Gary Meltzer mentioned in reply that he had been thinking also about the Iliad in relation to Simone Weil, who, as many of you know, is a French Christian thinker who looked at the Iliad and was, I think, in some ways appalled by what it had to say about the human condition. Really took a lot of it to heart very much. And I thought that this would be actually not a bad way for us to begin thinking about it. I just want to read something very quickly because this summarizes her view of it. She's talking about the Iliad. The true hero, the true subject, the center of the Iliad is force. Force employed by man, force that enslaves man, force before which man's flesh shrinks away. In this work, at all times, the human spirit is shown or modified by its relation to force, as swept away, blinded by the very force it imagined it could handle, as deformed by the weight of the force it submits to. And I think, as you can see just from that quote, Simone Weil sees the Iliad as a portrait of the human condition in which the paramount fact is violence, right? Just violence. You look at what human beings are, what the world is like, and it's just violence, a kind of sheer, ugly, horrible, unredeemed violence. And it's not that she sees no room whatsoever for love and justice and forgiveness. If they weren't present, Homer's portrait wouldn't be so heartbreaking. But they're only present to the extent that Homer wants them to be present in the world and can't find them. And I think as far as Simone Weil is concerned, that's an argument for the existence of Christianity. There's a need for Christ. But a lot of people, when they look at the Iliad, don't see it that way. They think that there's something beneath the surface. There is something about the world that's redeemable in Homer's eyes. And I thought that maybe today we could start by just taking head-on this question of what is the role of violence in the Iliad? Where does it come from? What kind of role does it play in the world? And if there's something that redeems human beings from this terrible controlling role that it plays, what is it? And I thought that one place we could begin to do that is on the handout, the first passage that I've given you.
You have extras? Okay.
Yeah, I've got. Yeah.
Hold up your hand if you need a handout.
I thought that one passage we could look at is in the 21st book. This is fairly late in the great day of battle, as they call it. Achilles has lost Patroclus at this point, and he's perpetrating slaughter left and right. He's filled the river's commander with corpses. And he comes across Lycaon, this Trojan, and he has captured Lycaon in the past, and Lycaon offered him a ransom, and Achilles took it. Right? He took the ransom and spared his life before. But this time, having lost his friend Patroclus, Lycaon offers him the ransom, and he refuses. And this is what he says, and it's an absolutely chilling remark. And I was wondering, can we get somebody to volunteer to read this? Somebody? Please.
Fool, don't speak to me of recompense. Until his fated day came upon Patroclus, it was dearer to me to spare Trojans, and many I took alive and sold. But now not one will escape death, whomever God places into my hands before Ilion. Not one of all the Trojans and Priam's sons, beyond all. No, die you too. Friend, why take on so? Patroclus is dead, and he was far better than you. Do you not see what I am like? How beautiful and great? My father was a good man, and my mother that bore me a goddess. And yet death is over me too, and harsh fate. Some dawn or twilight or midday will come, and someone will take my life in Ares, hitting me with the spear or arrow from its string.
And I guess the reason I chose this is that this is one passage where Achilles really justifies out loud and in stunning terms refusing mercy to somebody who's begging for his life. This is why he's killing him. And I guess I just want to start by asking, what does he say about why he's refusing to spare him? What's the justification for taking his life?
Sounds like he just really feels like it, really. Letting out some of the grief he feels over his friend and kinsman, Patroclus, I guess. He said it in there, like, he thought Patroclus was better than this guy, and Patroclus didn't survive, so I guess neither should he, in his words.
Let's not do hands. I mean, let's just have a conversation, to the extent we can.
Well, I think that he's saying that, like, life isn't fair. Life wasn't fair to Patroclus. I'm fated to die early, but I'm like a great person too. Like, I'm a great warrior. How is that fair? So you don't deserve to live either.
I think there's a sense of Achilles telling him not to ruin his death, like to face his death bravely, and to kind of have this glory that Achilles thinks of so highly. And he's kind of destroying himself by begging for his life, and Achilles kind of dislikes him for it.
I was sort of following up on the same thought. It almost seems like, and not just for this passage, but the turning point is that it's sort of the act of war was sullied by this kind of idea of ransoms and things that could be done, deal making, and whereas it should just be life or death. It should just be that simple, and that there's something more noble in that than the management of war, so to speak.
Something tipped it over the edge to make it that way. I mean, up to Patroclus' death,
Right.
It was dearer to me. And I'm not sure what the word is for that, but it was dearer to me to spare Trojans. But once Patroclus died, something changed.
Well, and I was thinking specifically of how he and Agamemnon are going back and forth about who got what tribute and who should have what and all. And it's sort of like that crystalline moment of that loss for him was to say, that's what it's really all about.
There might be an element of disillusionment too, where Achilles suffered many disillusioning experiences throughout the entire narrative, and this willingness to be merciless could be an expression of the final disillusionment.
What do you make of the fact that he calls him friend at the moment that he's about to kill him?
Well, I don't think. I mean, back in those days, like, everyone was considered like close kinship, and no one really felt like true hatred. Like, in the beginning, like Achilles says, the Trojans never harmed me. So back, everyone considered everyone else a brother or a sister. Everyone treated everyone else like they were family. So to him, he's still a friend. Like, he doesn't really have much against him. I think he's just like letting out his grief from Patroclus' death. It's kind of complicated, but.
there's something that you can see about him as a friend even at this particular moment, maybe?
Not at this point.
I think that they're friends because they're both fighting for a cause that either they were forced into, like Achilles, well, sort of, and they're both fighting for their country. So maybe it was just a relationship that they had.
I think it means that they're both in the same boat, sort of. Like, they're both basically doomed to fight this horrible war in an unfair world. And, they're in it together. They're on opposite sides, but they're in the same war. So, it doesn't really mean that they're, like, actually friends in the literal sense. But there's, like, a sense of being together in this.
Yeah, I think they're both just kind of dealing with. I think like too often we get caught up in like the right or wrong or the reasons behind something, and I think at this moment Achilles and whoever this guy is, his name escapes me. Like they're just really just dealing that violence is something that exists, not really getting behind why it does or the right or wrong of it. Just that's what it is. Just deal with it, and how you react to violence, like your bravery or your cowardice or how much money you spend or how much money you get, doesn't really matter at this point.
Well, they can also be friends because I think they've already had associations with each other with the whole trade beforehand. So they've had a pact of sorts, and now they know each other, and that's why they could have all been friends.
I would have thought that one way to understand that would be that if they were friends, maybe he'd spare him this time too. I mean, there's something really chilling about calling somebody friend at the moment that you're killing them.
Well, he's angry. It's kind of hard, when the dearest friend died, and this is his way of bringing him to spare something.
Earlier on in the same passage, it says, whomever God places into my hands, and he's just saying, just because you're my friend, it just doesn't refuse you. You're still someone who's been placed in that path of destruction.
Yeah, to me it's almost as if Achilles becomes like a war machine, a killing machine himself, and like an agent of death, sort of like, maybe an agent of the god of the underworld, or the god of war or something. So he's just merciless, and it's almost as if he's trying to get Patroclus' death out of his system to conquer it by killing as many people as he can. So it is chilling. I agree with you.
Would it be too strange to say that it's almost like the lines are blurring between Patroclus and Lycaon? And I mean, it's almost like he's saying, "Die, you two friend." It's almost like he could be talking to Patroclus. Would that just be too strange?
I think the fact that his friend died is what changed that. I don't think he's looking at him as his friend. He's just saying, doesn't matter, friend or enemy, that's where the line is blurred because I'm now a weapon of mass destruction because it doesn't matter.
I think he's sort of lamenting on the fact that everybody's going to die because he also says, like, yet death is over me too, and he's praising himself about how great he is, and yet he died and Patroclus died. I mean, yeah, and now he's like, you're gonna die anyway, so.
Well, I don't really think it's like you're gonna die anyway. I think it's more the fact that they're friends because of the combat, and they're saying if like Patroclus died in the combat and he wasn't spared, why should I spare anyone else? He was more deserving than you. So it's not just we're gonna die anyway. It's like, well, my friend is dead, so you should die too, friend. And it's just friendship out of the sense of combat and your ultimate fate to die.
Would it be right to say then that what Patroclus' death shows is that there is no mercy in the world? And the fact that there is no mercy in the world means that you and I are together in this sort of horrible, merciless condition. That's how we're friends. And this is what we share. We're going to die together in a funny way. What unites us is the fact we're both under this horrible, horrible fate.
He's also doing him a favor. If there is, it doesn't matter, right? May as well die now rather than dying later. Get it over with. Do him a favor.
And look how great a warrior is giving him the coup de grace.
Right. It could be worse.
took Achilles to kill me.
He'll live on forever as being wiped out by Achilles.
But on his knees, right, begging for his life.
It's hard to see that. He's trying to enlighten him.
And only Achilles knows that.
There's something funny here that is it necessary or is it not? Because Achilles is saying, this is why I am deciding to kill you now, because death is inevitable. But if I'm deciding to kill you, then your death right now isn't inevitable. It's sort of like he's saying both. I'm not sure what to make of that.
I think for Achilles it just became very formulaic because before Patroclus' death, as he says, he would be willing to spare someone's life. But once Patroclus dies, it just becomes very clear to him what his purpose is. His purpose is just to kill everyone in his path until he kills the man who killed his friend Patroclus.
I think that before the death of Patroclus, he saw like an illusion of mercy, but now, which is why like he would have thought that there was mercy in the world before, but now like he's become disillusioned and he sees that there is no mercy.
What do you mean by illusion of mercy? That's an interesting term.
Well, for Achilles, like, Achilles seems to be saying that there is no mercy in the world. Well, clearly there seems to be, because he would have spared this guy before Patroclus was killed. And, but now, suddenly he doesn't feel merciful anymore. Maybe that's because he feels like he's seen through an illusion of mercy.
But he wasn't really merciful before. He would spare Trojans and sell them. I mean, yeah, he didn't kill them, but he's not saying, oh, here, go live a happy life.
That's
He's
true.
saying, go be a slave. So
He is passing his mercy, though, isn't he? He says,
he speaks of recompense. He
What?
speaks of recompense. He doesn't call it mercy.
well, yeah.
Can I'm not sure about that. I mean, there are lots of lines where actually pity and recompense are lined up. Accepting recompense can be in a way of showing pity. The expectation, I mean, when Achilles accepts recompense for Hector's corpse, I think that is a kind of showing pity too. So I mean, I grant you, I mean, it's not like free giving, and it is true, it's a life of slavery, okay. But
Sparing.
You're still alive, though. You're still
Yeah.
alive. It's true.
There's also, there's three things that he makes reference to in passing, and says, in a way, it's the fatalism comes in the fact that it doesn't matter if you're royal, because he says, and Priam's sons. It doesn't matter if you're good. He mentions his friend, and then he goes on to mention himself. There's even a semi-divine person like myself is doomed to die. So accept it.
that's another sort of bizarre moment. You see how big and beautiful I am.
Achilles has immortality to think about, too, because of his parentage, which I suppose makes it, deepens it for him. It's related to immortality, and yet not immortal itself.
And it's kind of worse for Achilles because he knows, like, when kind of like the time he's going to die. Like, it was predicted he would die at Troy if he went there. So it's worse for him because he knows he's going to die and he knows it's coming soon. Other people have the freedom just, like, not, like, it's the whole ignorance is bliss. Like, they can go off not knowing and just live their life doing as much. Like, Achilles has a time limit and he knows it. And that's what makes it worse for him.
Yeah, if Achilles knows he's going to die soon, he probably doesn't have much use for the money he would otherwise get had he freed this guy. Like, it's not like he could spend that or leave it to somebody he knows. And I think he doesn't get caught up in the morality of it either. He knows that he has a time, and maybe for this guy like Chaon, there's no deserve about it. It's just time for him too.
Is it simply not deserving, or is that not precisely the infuriating thing, that there are people who deserve and they don't get what they deserve? So that wouldn't mean he's beyond morality, but it means
Well, I think
the world's out of whack.
I think the least you would say people are entitled to or deserve is a death. When or how it happens, I don't think he'd make those distinctions.
Could also kind of consider it as a mercy. You see how much pain Achilles is in, so you might be able to interpret it that he's sparing Lycaon of all of the tragedies and trials that he's been through. And I mean, to the Greeks, death was welcoming. Like, there was no fear of it because you knew there was a life beyond this, and it wasn't necessarily determined like a heaven or a hell, but it was just like, this is it, this is the afterlife. So it could be considered like he's sparing him like the trials of life and just living in peace in the afterlife.
Going back to what you said about Simone Weil, who saw in the poem an example of the need for Christian forgiveness, that this could be seen as a world like a hell on earth, a world without forgiveness, without pity, just where everybody's reduced to objects and victims of each other's passions and wraths and murderous impulses.
Yeah, and if I understood Peter's suggestion rightly too, it could be that one way to explain the origin of cruelty would be to say that it's actually a kind of rage at the unfairness of the world, or the fact that people who deserve better, they didn't get it, so how can I show it to these other people who don't deserve it? It's a kind of rage, right? It's just the unfairness of the world.
And you just want to take it out on the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And it's revenge. I mean, it's the brutality of revenge, the cycle of violence just it seems to be unstoppable. So you could relate that to the present day and the seemingly interminable conflicts in the Middle East and other places.
Yeah, it almost seems like there's an evolution within the speech where at first it's, you fool, so I'm angry at you because you're expecting to have something that Patroclus didn't get. That's why I'm about to strike you because you're asking for this, you're daring to. But in the end, there's more of a resignation, and the world is unfair. But then when it comes right back down to it, I wonder if he doesn't hit him as, I can't punish Ares, but I can still strike you. And you don't exactly deserve it, but no one does. And this is all I have left.
It strikes me that another thing that's really chilling about it is the sort of impersonality about it. It's like, I'm not killing you because I dislike you. I'm not killing you because I'm angry at you. I'm killing you because this is the way the world is. There's something about that that's even more sort of...
It gets less personal as it goes on.
Should we look at the second passage too? This is a passage uttered by Achilles after he learns of Patroclus' death, and I presume here, although this is debatable, but I presume he's talking about his anger with Agamemnon, saying that he's sorry about that. Would somebody be willing to read this? Would you?
But that strife might perish from among men and gods, an anger which sets even a very intelligent man to rage, far sweeter than dripping honey, it waxes in the breasts of men like smoke.
Does anyone have any access to what it means for anger to wax in your breast like smoke, sweeter than dripping honey? Anybody with an anger problem here? Peter, I've seen you get mad. What's this about?
Well, I think I've never thought much about the waxes in the breasts of men like smoke, so I'm not going to try to take a stab at that. But sweeter than dripping honey, isn't there just a way that we can nurse a grudge? Like even when you say nurse a grudge, what is that all about? But it's like you start out kind of angry, but as you get more angry, it's like, yeah, and he did that, and he didn't even care what I thought. Yeah, and I bet he always does this to people. What kind of guy is that? And it's just, if you were to be honest about it, it's not simply unpleasant to really work it up. And I can imagine hitting the guy. And there's a certain thrill. What is that? What's the pleasure? What's the sweetness? So, I mean, everyone's moving away from me. But, that's the sweeter and honey, and it's not a full explanation because it doesn't say what it is that we think is so yummy about it. But that's the first part.
I think dripping honey is like honey drips implies that like it gets more, it like increases with time because honey, it takes time for honey to drip, and that's how like his rage is. Like at first he's like shocked, and then like the rage builds up inside of him, like dripping honey.
Yeah, people just get really caught up in the passion of it, and it just gets, I guess people like drama a lot, so I think drama probably has a lot to do with the anger and the passion, so.
All right, I have some access to this. 20 years ago or so, I had a dog, and my roommate's girlfriend once did something mean to my dog, okay? And I remember at that moment that I was like possessed. I mean, absolutely possessed. It was a kind of rage that was so intense. And I remember she looked at me and she blanched and ran. And this was how angry I was. I was really, really mad. But I remember this feeling of like this massive adrenaline rush. I mean, just absolutely huge. And for like hours afterwards, it was almost like being high on a certain kind of drug. It was just a totally different state of existence. And it was strange because it was like I hadn't been that alive in years. I didn't do anything about it, but it was a funny kind of thing. I mean, it was like some sort of divine force settling inside me almost.
Yeah, I don't think anger in that sense makes much sense. Maybe we can explain the wax as the breath, like smoke with that. But like, yeah, I think in a scene not too far after this, he's arguing with his horses afterwards, who somehow get the gift of speech, and then like it just doesn't make sense. And he kind of just gives up his feud with Agamemnon just that as quickly as it started, and then just goes off and just kills a ton of people.
Well, one kind of anger takes the place of another kind of anger. I mean, I'm not sure there's any forgiveness exactly. I mean, it's...
There's no sense to it either, I would say.
Well, there's no... He becomes angry with Hector in place of his anger with Agamemnon. It's, in one sense, it's perfectly rational to just go with him.
To be angry, yeah, but like why we like it so much, or why we get that feeling, why do we shake, why do we compare it to things as obscure as breasts and dripping honey and stuff like that?
I think something you just said stirred this in my mind, and the thing I'm thinking is that the first line is really what he wants to say, which is he wants strife to no longer be there because it seems that that's the thing that enrages people and makes them angry, is the strife of the world. But the thing that he's saying in the last two lines is that it's uncontrollable. It's uncontrollable in the sense that it's enticing to us. It makes us. With the dripping honey. It's almost like I picture the person with the honeysuckle, and you're anticipating that sweet drop coming from it. I don't know if they've done that, but it's like, but you have no control over it. You can't pull it out. You've got to just wait for it to come. So it entices us and seduces us in that sense. At the same time, it rises up in us like smoke and irritates us, and is something that we don't want. And yet, even though it's both an allurement and an irritant, it's just a way of describing that thing that is produced by the strife of the world. But ultimately, it's out of our control, and that's what I think.
It's definitely a cycle. Like, he sees this anger, and he doesn't like the anger in the world, and like you can see how he's a bit of a hypocrite because he hates this anger, and it makes him angry. So, and it just keeps on going in a circle. Like, how does he want it to end? Like, maybe Achilles, like maybe he realizes that, like, the only way for, like, the anger to stop is, like, if he dies. So, I don't know, like, he knows about his premature death. Like, maybe he's, like, he's, like, engaging in all this slaughter. Like, maybe he's looking for his death in some way.
I'm not so sure if it's a cycle. It's almost kind of like an uncontrollable factor or like an addictive drug, because like people who smoke, they probably hate smoking and know it's bad for them, but they can't stop because it's so addictive. It's like once you get on it, it's like completely out of control. Probably when people feel anger, they probably get so into it and like so that they don't have to think about anything else. They just have to focus on the anger and what they want to direct their anger towards. It kind of releases them in a way. So it's just kind of like a drug when you get hooked onto it and you can't stop. And you may realize that you hate it, but you're kind of sucked into it.
I think the release might be important. There's a kind of promise or possibility there of I can get out of all my problems. And this is not, I'm not continuing to reveal my own fascination with anger, but you know, my life is so pent up and frustrated in so many ways, and my friends die, and if I could just fix all this, and there's some kind of promise there as I'm angry that I can, if only I strike down this man. And if it were to be spelled out like that, then of course it doesn't fix all the problems, but anger somehow, maybe that's the sweetness, is you believe, if only for a minute, that you can set the world aright by hitting someone hard enough.
Yeah, I think by focusing on anger, he can like not think about his own fate and what he's been through and everything else. He just all he has to do is focus on the anger and like how to revenge his friend's death, and that makes his life easy in a way. And that's why he focuses on.
It's also kind of like a sadistic nature. Like he focuses anger and like strikes pain and misery into other people, so he can kind of disregard his own pain that's like just so immense that he has to keep on killing people to keep on getting like that short little burst of maybe like a perverted pleasure of killing other people and seeing them in pain. So, and this is just how it gets in there.
And yet he says that it's contrary to reason, because he says it sets even a very intelligent man to rage. So he's saying it's almost like it's you get out of control, and then it forces you to become the person who you don't want to be.
Can I just come back to this wonderful point you made about there's a lot of ways in which this is a very angry condemnation of anger, and it's a very sort of self-excusing condemnation of anger too, in the sense it's like anger is this cosmic force up here that does things to other people that they can't control. You know, would that the world weren't like this. And there's a funny way in which that excuses him for the things that he's done. They weren't his choices. He didn't choose to kill his friends. Right? I mean, he didn't choose to pull back from the battle. It's just the way the world is. And I wonder if there isn't something sort of revealing about that. Maybe the desire to see the world as this sort of random place where these dark, violent, evil, angry forces dominate isn't itself driven by some sort of need to see it that way, or some sort of desire to excuse ourselves. I don't know. Maybe it isn't a kind of projection, you know, that it is in some ways misguided.
Well, it kind of seems like it's an excuse to overcome morality. Because when you're angry, it feels good on two levels. It feels good on a physical level, because, you know, we're triggering adrenaline, we're triggering fight, and we're feeling good because, you know, it's just natural physiological reaction. It's like nice. But it's also good on a second level, which is a higher moral level that we develop through thinking, which is that it provides absolute validation for anything that you do. And when you're angry, you don't have to listen to facts, you don't have to listen to reason, you just have to go with the anger. And no matter what you do, no matter how wrong it might be, when you're not angry, when you are, you're just riding on pure emotion. And it feels good, but it's wrong. And you're able to tell that when you're not angry. But it feels so good, he's kind of trying to like just make another excuse for it. And it's kind of ironic because he's angry about anger. So he's having full validation in this idea that it's something uncontrollable, something that we have absolutely no ability to stop. When in reality, it's because of his own insecurities, his own fears, and his own problems with things. And because he has problems with them, he has to get angry at them because he can't figure them out by himself.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. Isn't he us? In the sense that we all suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and get frustrated and bitter and angry and grieve and want to do something about it, take matters into our own hands. And Achilles says at the end of the poem, he says these wonderful words that the best human life that anybody could expect is a life with a mixture of good and evil. So given that, I want to put out another question. In Achilles' particular case, what is the connection between his grief and his anger, his loss, his traumatic loss, and his murderous rage?
I think his rage is triggered by like his loss, because like after he loses his friend, he could blame everything on anger. He could escape his grief by becoming angry and just blaming everything on blaming his actions on anger instead of grief. He doesn't want to think about life without his friend. He could just rely on his anger on the Hector who killed his friend and just not think about it. Just focus on anger. And I think that in a way makes him feel stronger and less vulnerable, because after his friend dies, obviously he feels weak and like not as strong as like he thinks he is.
I think that after his friend died, he sort of just felt like he had less to live for, nothing to live for, so he sort of accepted his own fate to die, and it sort of made him angry that he had basically given up. So, and he said like, in anger, which that's even a very intelligent man to rage, he just completely loses all like check on his emotion and just turns to rage. And he's just killing people just to try to like mitigate his own pain and say, well, if I lose somebody, other people can lose somebody, because Patroclus did not deserve to die. So these people who do not deserve to die can as well, just to make himself feel like misery loves company, and he's just trying to vent in sort of an irrational way.
I wonder what exactly the consolation is, though. I mean, how exactly would it be a consolation for his loss of Patroclus, in however irrational a way, for other people to die as well?
Maybe it's a control issue. Like, he's lost control over, he can't control how other people are dying. So but he wants that control. He wants control over the events in his life. So he controls whether, like, Lycaon lives or not. He wants to feel that he is able to influence the deaths of people.
And aren't people already dying because of a loss? It's because of the loss of Helen that they've gone and they're killing all these people already, and so it's almost like the moment for him to get on board is the loss of this friend, and now it's personal for him. It's no longer I'm just kind of along for the ride.
And it's funny that his resentment earlier on is what led him to stop killing this great warrior who always, his job, he trucks in killing. He's a great warrior. And it was his resentment earlier that caused him to stop killing and refrain from doing battle. And then, so now, having rejoined the battle, he's in the position of expressing himself to the fullest as a killer. And I think the control also, being a great warrior and having that reputation control is his being.
Is it just any control, or because I find myself going back and forth on the question of whether, if someone were to say to Achilles, this isn't going to bring Patroclus back, would he just say, well, of course it's not. I wasn't thinking that on any level. Or would he say, no, you're right. Somehow I kind of thought it would. And the way you're putting it, well, I just want some control. I'm not linking this to Patroclus at all. I know he's gone. I just want some control. But is it possible, on the other hand, that on some level he's thinking if he rights the scales or rages against the machine enough, it will do something for Patroclus?
There's when he kills Hector, like his last dying words, and I guess back then they thought when people were dying they had the gift of prophecy, and Hector kind of tells him, like, you too, Achilles, you're going to die too, you're not going to get away from it, and he doesn't seem to care. He just kind of gives him condemnation, like, yeah, that's good. Like, I don't care. Like, I should eat you alive, I think he says, or hack like the meat off your bones. And he doesn't seem to be conflicted about that. That's what he is. He's just a killer. Like, everything about him's just telling him he's a beast. He needs to do it. He can't fight it. And that's just what he is. He doesn't have any problems with who he is. He doesn't make any apologies about his personality. He just tries to build his reputation as much as he can.
I agree. I think that Achilles doesn't necessarily use his anger as a control and try to kill people as an issue of controlling the situation that he can't get out of. I think he uses it more as maybe a subconscious distraction from the situations he's in. It's not necessarily his first choice maybe to kill all these people, but it's the way that he's built himself to be this unsympathetic character, this completely aggressive mind that's just built to eliminate, basically, to be the best. And so at that point, rather than most of us would, remorse the death of a friend or become sad and maybe even withdrawn, but Achilles does the opposite. He becomes more and more aggressive and more angry rather than depressed, and he just channels that into other people to eliminate out of his mind the idea of a lost friend.
I think in a way he's trying to find balance in his world because he's suffering from the loss of his friend, and I think he's thinking that why should I be the only one who's feeling this loss of like my best friend? So he goes out and kills people, and like that in that way he makes other people lose their best friends and their family, and that way he doesn't have to suffer alone. Like he knows there will be other people suffering with him, and I think that's like one of the reasons why he goes out in rage and like kills people, because that just makes him feel less alone because he knows there's other people suffering that way.
Well, I almost think it's not like trying to make other people suffer necessarily, it's just he's trying to get out of suffering. Like he's sort of through with stuff and he knows, like his mother says, you will live like a short life full of glory and your name will be remembered forever, or you will just like live a long and obscure life. And because he chooses the path of glory, he just decides, well, I'm already like completely sad, I've lost all like most of the people that are dear to me, I just want to end it. He's just trying to like speed towards his own death through death, and he's just like saying if I fight more, it makes me feel better because I'm angry. And it can only make things end faster because I'm being so like mean at all of my conflicts. Because he knows he's going to die in the war, so he just wants to find the release of death.
I think there is a certain aspect of the control issue because Patroclus, he knows there's a prophecy that Patroclus is going to die. And he sends Patroclus into battle anyways. So it's sort of like he didn't have a choice, like it was fate, and there's this sort of destiny to it. And then, but he also gets enraged and he gets comfort from killing other people because he's controlling their destiny. He is ending their life. And that gives him a sense of control that he failed to protect Patroclus and he lost control. But by killing others, he can kind of comfort himself.
It almost sounds like you're saying that he's acting like a god, like he's claiming to have the control over people's lives like a god. And then that makes me wonder, well, maybe the gods should be doing a better job of this themselves, but since they aren't, I'll do it. I mean, it's almost, and maybe when we get really angry, we sort of feel like it's as though we are a god.
But isn't that like the root of the problem? That like Achilles has been told by everybody, and he knows that he's such a powerful person, and he knows he's such a great warrior. And then death happens to him, like the death of a friend. And he's not powerful enough to control it. So obviously his friend dies, he feels grief. And he's like, why do I feel this grief? I hate it so much because I can't stand it. It makes me feel so bad. He says, but I'm so powerful, I have to be able to stop it, right? Because I can kill people, and I'm really good at it, and I'm powerful. So if I kill people, I'll be able to stop it. Because his mindset is that it's kind of interesting because he's turning into an animal and having animal reflexes to things that aren't natural, because he created this idea of a friend. We all kind of create this idea of friends. We all create this idea of friendship as a way because we have like higher emotions. But I mean, it's like it's a situation where something that isn't isn't natural, that we've kind of created for ourselves to like appease our own emotions, is kind of triggering something that is on like a lower level. Because what he has is like a physical reaction. It's a reaction of anger. But it's being caused by something like higher than him. So, but the thing is, it's at a level where no matter how much he does, something happens that he has no control over. But he feels like maybe because he's so powerful, he does, and that's the root of the problem.
I think he's so angry because he has the ability to be in control throughout the entire story of the Iliad. For instance, he could have prevented Patroclus' death if he had just put aside his feud with Agamemnon and got in a fight. Because he would have been able to protect him. So I think he shows a great deal of control throughout the entire story. For instance, he prays, his mother, and he gets the gods to take out, however many Greeks. But so he turns the gods upon his own army, and he creates death for his own side. And then after the Patroclus incident happens, which he could have prevented if he had just put aside his earlier rage with Agamemnon, his rage then transfers over, and he goes to controlling the lives of his actual enemy, the Trojans, and he goes on to fulfill his destiny.
Yeah, I think we can see like some regret here. I think he realizes that he's like such a well-honed weapon that his job is to just kill people, but I think he regrets the fact that he put himself into this like meat grinder of a situation where he knew he could have stayed home and just, had a bunch of kids and like had probably a lot of money, but he decided to put himself into this stressful situation where consequences are inexorably life or death, and a lot of people are going to die, and probably a lot of people probably you yourself. So I think even though he doesn't have any qualms about who he is, he just regrets the situation he had put himself into.
Well, I don't really think it's much of a regret that he put himself into, because back in those days, everyone believed in gods and how they controlled your own lives through fate and destiny. I think it's almost like he's kind of regretting about just like the specific fact, like he knows like he can't control anything in his life, and I think this goes back to the control issue. I mean, he accepts it, but he's still, it's like we seek what we don't want, what we don't have, or so he knows he can't control his own life because fate has already picked out everything. He really has no choice. Even if he like thinks he has a choice, that's how it was meant to be. So it's like it's like that whole control issue. He's trying to get some kind of control because he knows he really has none.
This is also like the first moment. I mean, as I'm kind of trying to follow along, it almost sounds like this is the first moment that he actually tries to control his rage, because he's going to go on to say, let bygones be bygones, done is done. Despite my anguish, I will beat it down, the fury mounting inside me down by force. And almost as if anger, I think Stephen, you mentioned before, that the anger was what made him sit on the sidelines. And now that he actually has a reason to be angry, in a weird sort of way, he's going to try to put that down, even though the anguish is going to make him fight. And so it looks like anger, but I'm not certain it's still anger. I mean, I'm not certain.
Right, I think they had, I think the ancient Greeks and, the people who read this back in the day did have some concept of divinity and kind of free will, but the gods kind of put an end to that. You can see that when Hector's going to fight Achilles, he realizes he's going to die, but I think where the Iliad makes its most strong argument is that even if something's bound to happen, like there's something to be said for people that stand tall and kind of struggle and kind of fight against what's inevitable. I think that says something about your character. It's something you can build yourself up in, even though you're at the end of your life.
I wonder if that desire to do that as you're doing it, you might seem to be described as a kind of illusion of control. And I wonder if that's, you think you have a control that maybe ultimately you don't. And I wonder if that's not what Achilles is referring to a little more specifically when he speaks of the smoke in our breasts and the overcoming of one's intelligence. And I found myself wondering, what is it that you're not seeing when you're angry? And could it be that you think you have more control than you really do?
I have to agree. I tried to bring this back. I think Achilles, especially, really knew his fate at the end. But he was going to do everything in his power, being so noble, to stop it. Maybe not stop it completely, but up to a point where he could do everything to fight it, because he is a fighter. That's what he's born to do. And I think maybe it was almost he was vain enough to think that he was able to stop this. I'm so godlike. I'm Achilles, the greatest warrior. Maybe I can turn this around in some way. Maybe I can stop this. Maybe the control, maybe it wasn't necessarily an issue of him controlling other people, but maybe it was almost, I'm the best. How could such grief become of me? And if it can become of me, why shouldn't other people be experiencing it even more than I am? I mean, after all, I'm the greatest. He does refer to himself as the godlike one throughout. I mean, I think he definitely, maybe not out loud, but subconsciously agrees that he is almost deserving to be seated with the gods, whether or not that may be true. So he just continuously wants to, when things happen to him that he can't control, it frustrates him to no end. So I think that throughout the story, he would have been fighting, would have been trying to take it over, try to change it. Maybe even if he couldn't inevitably, but to a point.
What about the idea of guilt? Does Achilles feel guilty because he didn't save Patroclus, and he wants to show how much he cares for Patroclus? Gosh, I couldn't save him. How can I show everybody how deep my caring was for Patroclus? Well, all right, I'm going to kill this many people. Then you can see how much I care for him.
Well, I don't think it's about other people. I think it's mainly about himself, because it's like what you were saying. He feels like, I'm a god. I can do this. And that's like what everybody tells him. But the thing is, whenever if you have a friend or a family member die from something if you ever had a friend or a family member killed, it's like for a second you feel just for an instant like I could change that, like the situation that got them killed, I could change that. And then you stop, and then you're like, no, I can't. Or somebody tells you, like, no, that's ridiculous. You're fantasizing. But who's going to tell Achilles that you can't? Who's going to tell Achilles, no, you're just some schmuck. You can't change anything. You're weak. No, they've been telling him his entire life he's like the greatest warrior of all time. So who's there to stop him from thinking that he can? Is it sort of like people have built this perception that they've built this perception around him that he can do whatever he wants, and that he lives in that world, and that something happens, and he thinks he can do it, but he can't, and the end result is he kills hundreds of people? I don't know. But I think it's more about him. I think it's more about how powerful he thinks he is, or versus how powerful he really is.
Can I just ask, if the problem is anger, if that's really what Homer, and Simone Weil is right about this, the problem is human anger. What does it take to actually forgive? I mean, what does it take to somehow set that aside? What is it that Achilles is either missing or that we need to take away from the poem on that score?
I almost think like he just needs time. Like there's the 5 stages of depression thing that we've gone over in like our physical health class and stuff. And I think like him killing people is almost like he's just in a bargaining stage. Like if I like do this, is there any way that like you could at least make me feel better or something? And he's just trying to reach acceptance, and he just needs time, and that's like the thing that he's missing. He just needs to like accept the fate of others, like he's accepted his own fate, and he's like almost trying to reach this acceptance by experiencing it firsthand through others, sort of by like seeing like, okay, well, I'm gonna make you accept your fate. Maybe it'll help me accept what's happening to me a little bit more.
I think the one other thing that's interesting is that we don't want to forget the fact that we all see this fact that he's a warrior and destroying all of these Trojans, right, cutting them down like grass. We see that as a negative, but from the Greeks' point of view, it's actually a very good thing. So what he's doing, we're interpreting it. I mean, I'm not trying to get into the psychology of his own personal anger, but the idea that what he's doing as an action is not only what's expected of him because he's this great warrior, but it's also a good for his people, for his nation, and so I just think that it's important to not lose sight of the fact that what he's doing may be working out his own issue, so to speak, but he is doing it in a way that would be considered acceptable. I mean, he's not just mass murdering, you know, going and like throwing people in his basement and chopping them up or something.
But he did kill Lycaon when he was begging for his life. And I don't know. I think that the reason why Homer put that in is he was trying to say, yeah, you know, it's neat. He's killing all these guys. It's badass, but he's a monster. He's killing people that are begging for their lives. And he's trying to tell them that, like, he's not in the state of, like, omnipotence and godlike power. He's in the state of, he's insane. And he's going, and he's doing these terrible, terrible things. Because I don't even think the Greeks are ruthless enough to think that that's a good thing.
I think my response would be that, and I think this is where Neil also talks about this idea of it, is that it's that the thing that makes him monstrous ultimately is that it's the barbarity of war that drives him to do this thing. So I mean, so for example, in World War I, people are going out to fight and die for civilization, and yet they end up making homemade clubs with nails in them to slaughter their enemy. I mean, you know, in the trenches. And so it's like, you go into it for the right reason. And that's what I'm saying, is that on the surface, what he's doing, being a great warrior and slaying the enemy, from the Greek point of view, is a good thing. But I think underneath it, it's the fact that to put yourself into that situation, and then also to have these additional psychological issues related to his friend thrown in the mix, it does turn you into a monster, to use your word.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Steve. I think I caught your name was, but
I'm on Darren. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think the Greeks did think back then that that was okay, because there's an interplay earlier in the book where Menelaus and Agamemnon are talking about sparing someone for a ransom, similar like the first quote we read, and Menelaus says to his brother, like, no one's getting away, not even babies in their mother's stomach, like no one's getting away, not even unborn babies, not even women. And then when they sack the city, they kill everything that's moving. So I don't know, I don't think they thought it was wrong, so that's why they kept doing it. So I don't know.
Well, I think we said this would be over at 4, Gary, is that right? Can I just close by saying a word of thanks to Darren Foley and the good people at Falvey for hosting this, and with any luck, this will be an annual event, and I think we're thinking next year of the Aeneid as one possibility. There's some other suggestions on the table, but maybe we'll see some of you back then.
This first passage reminded me so much of the death of Turnus at the end of the Aeneid. Incredible.
Complete accent.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you.